Yeah, it's very, you're right. It's very, very similar motivation. Yes, right.
Yeah, the same kind of sense of humor. That's an astonishing story, Brian. I'd never heard of this guy, and I don't know how many times I've heard the song "Ohio" by
Oh, right, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
again and again and again.
Yep,
That is a
super
great
interesting.
one. Yeah, and right after that, I think it was about a couple weeks after that, were the Jackson State shootings at the historically Black Jackson State University,
Hmm.
where uh, a bunch of students were killed by, I believe, state police. I'll have to look that up. I'm not sure, but it kind of got lost in the shuffle after Kent State, where no, and after Kent State too, I believe they polled the people in and around the university, like the community,
Hmm.
and something like 2/3 of the people polled were like, well, they kind of had it coming. I want to say it was something like
This is
2/3.
at Kent State or at Jackson State.
Yeah, no. At Kent State,
Oh,
just this
right,
kind of attitude towards, well, the students had it coming, just kind of like, really, really.
right. Yeah, can
Um,
you be this clueless and tone deaf? Yes, yes. Apparently, you can.
Good thing that doesn't happen anymore, huh?
Well, yeah. I mean, in this day and age where police violence, I mean, yeah, it's insane that it feels like. I mean, that was 50 years ago, and even now, the the percentage of folks that are in law enforcement or in the military who are in it solely for the shit kicking, it just seems alarmingly high. Again, not that funny, but
No, but interesting
but certainly true.
nonetheless.
Right.
Well, let's see if
There you have it.
let's see if I can pull some yucks in on the second half when we get to my story. So,
Okay. Well, quickly, I have for you yet again. Here we go for the curse word.
woohoo!
It is time for the Dream Idiots Curse Word of the Week.
So this one is definitely one you've heard before, but it was one that came to mind because of the one little news item I'm going to drop in here. This week's curse word, schadenfreude. I know you've heard.
Oh yeah, sure.
Schadenfreude.
It's
Pleasure derived from another person's misfortune.
So the reason schadenfreude came up this week was because this was actually a story that got a fair amount of coverage. It was actually up in your part of the world in Loveland. Loveland is up north of Denver.
I think so. Yeah.
So, Colorado police officer in 2020 was arrested. This woman, her name was Karen Garner. She's 73 years old. She has mental disease. She has, basically dementia and sensory aphasia. She was having a crisis, and this guy basically took her down incredibly aggressively. The officer's name is Austin Hopp, Hopp, and tackled her, pinned her to the ground. And there's body cam footage of this. And then, so, she's 73. She probably weighs 102 pounds, soaking wet. And again, he's being as egregious and over the top as he possibly can. Tackles her, pins her to the ground. You can actually hear in the video, you can hear the pop as her shoulder separates.
Oh God.
It is awful. And then later on, there is footage in police headquarters where they're reviewing the body cam footage. And this guy is showing another officer the footage and laughing when this woman's shoulder pops because he thinks it's fucking funny. And there's been just huge outcry, and they filed charges against him. And if he'd been found guilty, he could have gone to jail for between 10 and 30 years, but he accepted a plea agreement. And I think for simple assault, but he's going off to prison for 5 years because of his just complete horseshit approach to law enforcement. So he's a guest of the state of Denver for the next 5 years, and presumably would get, the way the criminal justice system works now, he probably gets out in 18 months or 2 years. But hopefully his career in law enforcement is over, and hopefully he has a really, really big angry cellmate.
That was my next question. Is will he get to go back to work after all of this? And that's why they call it. That's why they call it Loveland.
I don't. Yeah, exactly. I don't think if you've been convicted of a felony, can you still? I don't know if you can or not. I mean, it seems to me if you have a criminal record, you can't then be enforcing crime. But so many of these guys do such, so many just fucking terrible things. I don't know if you can or not, but hopefully his career is over and he has to go be I don't know, something else.
All right. Thank you, schadenfreude. That's one of those wonderful words that's just no direct translation in English.
Yeah.
Great word.
One day I'm definitely going to have a Dream Episodes episode where we just talk about the top 10 words from other languages that don't exist in English and can't exist in English because they're just so perfect.
You're right. They are perfect in their essence and have
in that language. So schadenfreude is on there. I mean, I can't think of another one, but there must be other words that are siesta. I mean, there's no English word for siesta, right? It's just too perfect for,
because nap just doesn't cut it.
Nap doesn't cut it, right?
All right. Well, thank you. I feel great happiness in that situation. I believe this is a first for us, with the exception of your updates for the Murdaugh, but I've got the first of a two-parter today.
Excellent.
That I'm calling Let's Get Organized. And what I would like to do is start with a discussion of a book by Howard Bloom called The Lucifer Principle, a scientific expedition into the forces of history. And this is a book I read about 15 years ago. It's really fascinating. And he's got 5 concepts that make up the Lucifer Principle. And I want to focus on the 5th one, but I kind of want to go over what he's talking about because it's kind of important to get his overall gestalt of what he means by the Lucifer Principle. And the Lucifer Principle is basically this idea that we have this inbuilt mechanism that wants to destroy stuff and that we have to fight against it every day in order to not do that. That we have this mechanism that wants us to do that. So here's a couple of quotes that might get us going. Evil is woven into our most basic biological fabric, and we need, quote, a new way of reshaping our destiny. That's from page 3. Page 7. This book is about the social body in which we are unwitting cells. So let's get into the 5 concepts of the Lucifer Principle. The first one is that we are made up of self-organizing systems. That is, we replicate through sexual reproduction, and we have traits that get replicated through, say, genes, right? That's how we continue as a species.
Right.
Okay, that's part 1, self-organizing and replicating systems. Then he makes an argument that the second part of the Lucifer Principle is that we are part of a superorganism, that we are, as individual, disposable parts of a being much larger than ourselves. Okay, we are elements of what we call humanity.
Mm-hmm, sure.
And that if we affect ourselves, we affect other parts of humanity. It's very, religion tries to address this when I believe it's the Buddha says, when I harm myself, I harm others. When I harm others, I harm myself.
Right.
The third concept of the Lucifer Principle, and this is one that has basically been reduced to an image with a funny caption underneath it, but back years ago when I was first looking at this, when I was in graduate school, is the idea of the meme. And I'm sure that we send memes every day, but the idea of a meme is so important because a meme is to an idea what a gene is to a physical characteristic trait. A meme is, in essence, well, how would you define a meme? Let me just ask you that, just as we know it, how would you define what a meme is?
Oh, geez. I didn't know. It's gonna have to think today.
Sorry.
I mean, I know memes are just those, those single frame, one-off thoughts, but they're tied to an image. So how to define that in one sentence? That's a hard one.
It is. Here's one way that he thinks about it that I think is the best way. It's a self-replicating cluster of ideas. Once you put it out there, it keeps replicating itself.
Right.
And if we look
being forwarded, it's being sent on. Right.
Right. And even if we take it back thousands of years, a meme that we have is don't trust outsiders. When we all lived in caves and clustered together in small tribes,
right.
We were afraid of the outsiders. So we would tell each other stories about the outsiders coming in and taking our stuff.
Right.
That becomes a meme that we pass on as an idea from generation to generation. Okay. Part 3, and part 4, rather. This is the one that I have most problems with. And wrapping my head around it, literally. The neural net. And he calls this the group mind, a massive learning machine. That if we are a superorganism, it makes sense that we have a superorganic mind that we all learn from. this gets kind of Jungian, right? That there's this collective unconsciousness that sort of connects us all. And he's almost getting to telepathy, really, when he's talking about this.
Right.
But if you think about the way that herd animals work, like if herd animals are out grazing and a predator gets into their midst, they act as one, they move as one. And one of the ways that I think about it with us is think about parallel thinking. And we were talking about this before we went on the air. If you were to ask a communication scholar, for example, who invented television, you're not going to get a clear-cut answer. They're not going to say, oh, so-and-so invented television. They're going to say, well, there's this fellow named Philo Farnsworth out in Utah. Then there was this Russian-American dude named Zworykin. Oh, and then there was a Scotsman named John Logie Baird who worked on some stuff. You're not going to get an answer because there was all these people working on the same problem from a different point of view at the same time.
Right.
Parallel ideas.
Jack Benny is the right answer, by the way. Just saying.
Jack Benny. Okay. Radio's the same way. You could say Marconi, you could say Tesla, but you also have guys like Howard Armstrong. You have even Lee DeForest, who didn't really understand how radio worked apparently, but still contributed to it in some way. Now, the fifth element, and this is the one that I want to really focus on, but looking back at it one more time, self-organizing and replicating systems, the superorganism, the meme, and the neural net. The final one that I want to talk about is the pecking order. And this is the one that I find the most fascinating. Because like the term broadcasting, as in radio and television, broadcasting comes from, of course, farming. When you broadcast your seeds into a field to get them to grow, the pecking order comes from farming. And there's a fellow by the name of Thorleif Schjelderup Ebbe, who was Norwegian. He was a naturalist. He liked to study the natural world. And when he was on his parents' farm, he noticed that the same chickens ate in the same order every day. The same one or two chickens would come out first, then everybody else filed out. And he wondered what was going on because it was like they understood that certain chickens got to go first. So he studied that. And we see that in other species, right? When wolves work together to bring down a prey, they get to eat in certain orders. The hunters get a little bit, then the mothers take some for themselves and some to regurgitate for their pups. And then the social outcasts, the elderly, the infirm eat last. Monkeys do this, and people do this. We have a pecking order, whether it's natural or whether it's imposed, like the military, the way we structure our school systems, management trees, or what have you. It's number 5 that I want to focus on. And I'm going to talk about a little bit of a study here in the first part. And then in the second part, I'm going to talk about a second study that involves a documentary. So what Bloom does is he looks at a study in which a fellow by the name of Richard Savin Williams in the late 70s, and he's gone on to become a psychologist in the field of adolescent sexual orientation. And he's become a really positive voice in the debates over gay adoption, same-sex marriage. He seems like a really solid researcher and an all-around good guy. Richard Savin Williams was part of this research team that kind of addressed this idea of the pecking order. And for the purposes of these 2 episodes, I'm focusing on the way boys self-organize because I'm the father of 2 boys and I was a boy myself once. And so this is what I'm familiar with. I was, yes. And I still am, according to some people.
I dispute that, but go ahead.
There are female examples of this, which I will mention as we go along, particularly when it comes to the documentary. But in the 70s, Savin Williams and his research team looked at a summer-long camp for boys and how social hierarchies formed. And basically what he said is that you have a cabin, and then in the cabins, you get 4 campers. And as they watched them for the first couple of weeks, they found within about an hour or so, the individual campers within each cabin filled one of 4 social roles. Unspoken. There was a leader,
right,
who was charismatic, and all the other boys endeavored to be him or be his best friend.
Right.
2, there was a bully, a tough kid who may be kind of an outcast within the group, but when it came time to face off against other cabins, like in competitions, he was definitely part of the team and necessary. The 3rd role, the joker, the amiable one that could get everybody to laugh with a story or a joke or a well-timed belch, right? The joker was the funny kid.
Right.
And finally, there was the nerd.